What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Eye Test, where we simplify your process as a fantasy football manager. We're back with another episode. We got Bobby Amendola. Paul Orlando is back from watching the Orioles game.
No, this was Maddie's birthday. I took my girl out to a nice Italian restaurant, drank some wine.
Watched the Orioles. Nice.
No, we did watch the Orioles. We did.
Well, happy belated to Maddie. We all love her over here at the Eye Test, and we today are going to be sticking to our tier episodes, not crying, tiers, T-I-E-R, but we're going to do the quarterbacks this week. 2 episodes ago, we did running backs. Last week, we did wide receivers. Go back to our YouTube page, watch those videos, and while you're on our YouTube page, go ahead and press subscribe. We're still looking for that 100th subscriber. But go ahead, guys. Like those videos that you watch. Subscribe to our page. You can go ahead and follow us on our social media accounts. We're on TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We're putting our podcasts out on Spotify and Apple Podcasts for those that want to listen to us on their morning or afternoon commute. Guys, we're growing. We're putting out shorts on YouTube, TikToks, Instagram Reels, you name it. We got that daily content coming. So go ahead, show us some support, send us to your friends. We really, really appreciate it. Are you guys ready to start?
Let's do it.
Real quick, you guys know how many days we have left until the first NFL game?
87.
I think so. I think it was 80. I think it was 85.
Didn't we just show it on the when we were meeting before?
That's why.
I guess I'm asking our viewers.
I think it's 85.
I think it was 85. September 7th. So we're getting very close.
80.
And fantasy season starts much sooner than regular season. So we're looking like August 1st. So we're within like the 60-day mark. And we can't wait. We're getting closer and closer to that date. And we're going to get you super prepared for fantasy season. And that starts today with QB rankings. We're going to focus on redraft rankings. That's going to be a tiered system here. So we're not talking overall rankings. We're going to focus on tiers. Bob, do you want to start us off with our famous S tier for all the studs of the fantasy season?
I guess we have settled on the S tier standing for stud tier.
I like it.
And there's no better way to start a quarterback tier episode and with the S tier than with Patrick Mahomes, the best quarterback in the NFL. And he's the best quarterback in the NFL, and he was the best quarterback in fantasy last year as well. So really not much to say here. He is the tried and true, the elite of the elite quarterbacks. He is so consistent, 30-point games coming out the wazoo. You really don't even, his floor is pretty much 18 points. And even then, it's pretty rare for him to hit that floor. He had, only 4 games under 20 points last year, pretty much. Actually 5, but it was the last week of the season where he only played 88% of the snaps, and he still put up 15. So really not much to say here. What you're getting with Patrick Mahomes week in and week out. Unfortunately, he doesn't really have much rushing upside, but he more than makes up for it with his seemingly easy, 4 touchdown passing games.
Yep, and same with the S tier here, Josh Allen. Again, he does have more rushing upside than Patrick Mahomes, and quite honestly, he does have better receivers, but he's not putting up he's competing with Mahomes for the number 1 spot every year. So I was about to say he's not putting up the same numbers, but he really is. So we got 3 quarterbacks in the S tier here. Josh Allen is going to be the second quarterback taken off the board in your redraft league. In fact, usually the drafting of Pat Mahomes triggers the drafting of Josh Allen because it's usually those guys in your league who want that S-tier quarterback on their team, which I do recommend doing this year. So, yeah, he's got Stephon Diggs to throw the ball to. He gets a lot of rushing touchdowns. He gets rushing yards, and you're going to love him on your team if he's your quarterback. He stays pretty healthy, too, which is nice.
Yeah, does throw a little more interceptions than I would like. I think that's maybe why, although he makes it in the same tier as Mahomes, I think that's why people probably would prefer Mahomes over Josh Allen. Is that Josh Allen could be a little turnover prone, but again, the rushing upside of Allen kind of balances that out.
Yeah, and moving on to the third quarterback in our S tier, and the final one is, you want to talk about rushing upside. This kid has got it all when it comes to that, and he can also sling the rock down the field as well. He's got some great weapons, and that is none other than John's dad, Jalen Hurts. And and Jalen Hurts is coming off of an incredible campaign. World-class dude. I think everybody and their brother's rooting for this guy. Just signed a major contract. He's going to be the star in Philadelphia for a while, and he's going to be the star quarterback in fantasy for a very long time as well. We have Jalen Hurts rounding out the S tier for our quarterback tiers.
Yeah, something that these quarterbacks all have in common is they all have a stud wide receiver to throw to. And as we get down to our next tier, Bob, this guy also has a stud wide receiver that he can throw the ball to. In fact, he kind of has two.
Yes, he does have two, actually, even though one is, in my opinion, drastically better than the other. And that's Joe Burrow, obviously, with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Now, again, Joe Burrow doesn't make it into our S tier, but kind of the same thing with Patrick Mahomes. He doesn't have the rushing upside, but the passing volume is crazy for Joe Burrow. And he was QB4 last year, and that's saying something, that he doesn't really have any rushing upside, and he still finished as QB4. Quick numbers rundown: 4,500 passing yards, 36 touchdowns, and he actually did run for 5 touchdowns as well. So maybe I was a little bit wrong. Maybe there is some rushing upside there with Joe Burrow. I didn't know that, actually, until I just looked at it.
So what's that, 30 fantasy points right off the bat there, just for touchdowns?
Yeah, just for touchdowns. And I'm very surprised by these 259 rushing yards. That's like a third string running back.
Yeah.
So good for Joe Burrow there. But I think the reason he doesn't make it into the S tier is, again, there isn't that he's going to have some lower floor games. He doesn't quite have the consistency and ceiling as the other guys do. There's plenty of games where he finished in the teens last year. There's not a whole lot of 30-point games, which is what you want to see from guys in the S tier. So I think that's why Joe Burrow gets knocked down to the A tier here, but still a very, very elite quarterback that will be going early in fantasy drafts.
Yeah, guys, these are the quarterbacks that you want to get in like the first 4 rounds of your redraft league if you are aiming for a top quarterback. The top 5 quarterbacks are definitely the ones that you're going to want to be, honestly, probably reaching for or just getting right at their ADP, because they're going to go the second their ADP passes. So the last guy in the A tier is none other than Paul's stepdad, Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson, he's the I'm glad the Lamar Jackson heat has died down. But let's just go into his numbers last year before he did come down to earth / get injured. Lamar Jackson, you want to talk about S tier capability. He came out the gate last year scoring 22 points, 43 points, and then 40 points in the first 3 weeks of the season. I mean, that's amazing. That's why he makes it into the A tier, because he's got the potential to hit S tier ceilings and having that upside as an S tier. However, he's not going to do it as consistently as Mahomes, Allen, and Hurts. However, we are going to see those 40-point games. It's just not going to be as predictable, because there are games where he might score 10 points, 16 points, 15 points, and he did it quite a bunch. And then, of course, you have the health of Lamar that is a concern. We try and not make that be a part of our tiered rankings. We try not to make that come into the conversation. However, with Lamar, it is pretty evident that it's hard for him to play a full season. So Lamar Jackson has the upside to get into the S tier, but we're going to throw him in the A tier with Joe Burrow. Lamar Jackson's probably a 3rd or 4th round, probably 4th round quarterback or a draft pick in your redraft leagues. And that does it for the A tier. So we only have 2 quarterbacks in the A tier. The reason for this is there's a large drop off between the A tier and the B tier, much smaller than between the S tier and the A tier. So for the B tier, Paul, you can start us off. These are guys that are going to be able to get in between your 20 and 30 points per game. However, you're just not going to see it all the time. You'll probably notice some struggle weeks with these quarterbacks. Paul, take it away with the B tier.
So, yeah, I think that if you are shooting for a top 5 quarterback, once Lamar is off the board, you can take it easy there. There's no sense in reaching on these guys in the 4th or 5th round after Lamar goes. I think there are plenty of better options in those middling rounds for your roster, and you can still get some pretty good talent. So, starting the B tier off, what if I told you guys that this quarterback from week 6 to week 13 never performed worse than the QB 8? He was always a top 8 quarterback, and he sprinkled in 2 QB1 performances. Do you have some kind of guess of who this young player could be?
I know who it is.
Is it Justin Fields?
It's Justin Fields. It's like you guys were there in the meeting with us when we were.
I knew it, dude. I believe it.
Yeah, so Justin Fields, we have Justin Fields kicking off our B tier. And just remember, guys, we don't just take into consideration the stats last year. We also look at where we project them to be this year. And so Justin Fields showed that he was an extremely capable runner last year, that he was just mashing people with his legs. But really the big concern here is I think the potential is through the roof with Justin Fields. I loved him as a prospect. I think he throws a really good football. He does have DJ Moore, finally a decent wide receiver to throw to. No shade on Darnell Mooney, but DJ Moore, I think, has the potential to be a wide receiver 1 on a depth chart, maybe not in fantasy. But the only question mark with Fields here is that the Bears are still rebuilding, and the Bears are not the greatest football team right now. I couldn't even tell you who their new head coach is. Do you guys know who he is?
I was trying to figure it out when we were talking about it earlier in the meeting, and I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah. So we can just cut
I still
that
got
part
the Bears being second in their division this year.
Yeah, I mean the Bears definitely have. So they're in what with Minnesota, Green Bay, Detroit.
Yeah, I got Detroit, Chicago, Minnesota, Green Bay.
That's really bold.
Write that down.
I'm gonna write that down.
Detroit, Chicago, Minnesota, Green Bay.
I see where you're at, John.
Yeah.
You're John's homering on the Bears this year. That's
how can I homer on the Bears? That makes no sense. Do I have any Bears players on my team?
You love Justin Fields this year, but
oh yeah, totally.
Paul, I think you hit the nail on the head, honestly. Although I think Justin Fields does still possess elite upside, I think to be in the A tier and obviously the S tier as well, you need to show that you're a truly capable passer, which all the quarterbacks ahead of him have. And a lot of these quarterbacks in the B tier have proven that they're very capable passers as well. I haven't seen enough from Justin Fields where I'm ready to put him in that higher tier, but I mean, the rushing upside is undeniable. Like nearly 1,200 rushing yards last year, 8 touchdowns. And if he could, I mean, it's just crazy. Like 2,200 passing yards, just I can't get behind that from an A tier quarterback.
Very fair argument. Very fair.
Now we're moving on to another B tier quarterback who actually I think a lot of people would have said was in the A tier maybe this time last year before the season started. But he had a really, really bad year for his standards. He hardly finished as a QB1, and that's Justin Herbert. Now, obviously, a lot of things went wrong last year for the Chargers, namely Mike Williams and Keenan Allen not being able to stay healthy, and Austin Eckler pretty much being the only reliable wide receiver, and he's a running back. So that definitely played against Justin Herbert falling and not having a good year. But some of these games were just really eye-opening. He had multiple single-digit games and 2 very low double-digit games. So I think the situation is going to be better with Los Angeles this year. But I'm not ready to put him back into the A tier until he proves that he has that elite upside again, because last year there was just nothing to be shown for it, and I was very concerned from what I saw last year. Do you guys agree with me?
Yeah, I think what we learned last year was not to reach on Justin Herbert. I think that's going to be the theme for the B tier. You don't want to be reaching on these guys. You want these guys to fall to you. You want to make sure you have a strong 4 to 5 or 6 draft picks under your belt before you start getting a quarterback in the B tier.
Yeah, and for Herbert last year, if you guys remember in our league, there was a couple week stretch where we were discussing whether Herbert's even startable at this point. I mean, people had a QB2 on their bench that was performing better. Insert Geno Smith, insert players we'll talk about later.
Before we move on, this 5-game stretch is extremely concerning from a guy that's considered one of the elite quarterbacks in the league from a fantasy perspective. 14, 9, 19, 13, 12.
No. That's like flex.
That's really, really bad. That's like even in a super flex league, you're like, what the
Yeah.
Yeah.
Seriously. That's really bad. Well, this guy, we are certainly not saying that about this guy who's also in the B tier, which honestly does have potential for improvement in the tier system. And this could be a guy that some people may even reach on. He made the jump from QB 23 in 2021 to the QB 8 last year in 2022. That's Trevor Lawrence. Showed some massive improvements in 2 areas that I really noticed. One is touchdowns. He practically doubled his touchdowns from 12 to 25, and he cut his interceptions in half. That is amazing improvement. Went from 12 and 17 to 25 and 8 touchdowns to interception ratio. Trevor Lawrence he made a huge jump in the offseason last year, and I think he's going to do it again this year. I think it's mainly not so like the team that's getting better. I think that just Trevor Lawrence, the quarterback, is going to really polish his skills. And honestly, he'll be the one making his team better as opposed to like a team making a quarterback look good. So that's Trevor Lawrence. He finds his way into the B tier. Let's pull up some of let's see what his ceiling was last year. You're gonna get a lot of 18 to 23 point games. You'll get a sniffle of a 30-point game here and there, but there is potential for like a big bust Trevor Lawrence type of game.
Yeah.
In fact, I believe that last year, every game that Trevor Lawrence threw an interception, the Jaguars lost. And if you look at his fantasy score for games that he scored, for games that he threw an interception in, 14 points, 6 points, 12 points, 7 points. He got lucky with a 28-pointer and then 4 points. And then you look at the games that he didn't throw an interception, 18, 25, 24, 18, 16, 20, 23, 16, 33, 18. So quite a theme there. Trevor Lawrence, if he can just – maybe that's a mental thing. I don't know what's with that. But if you're starting to notice a bunch of interceptions that Trevor Lawrence is throwing, work on trading him. I don't know. Probably not the best advice. I would probably recommend holding Trevor Lawrence. But, yeah, just something I noticed about Trevor Lawrence. That's why he goes in the B tier.
Yeah, that's actually an absurd pattern. That's absurd.
Yeah,
so I'm telling you, play quarterback in the NFL, you have to have goldfish brain. Like, you throw an interception, you have to completely forget about it 3 seconds later. Like, you cannot carry that over.
Yeah. Well, it seems like the next quarterback has goldfish brain because he can never remember. He's like, wait, did I go to the massage parlor yesterday? I forget. So who's that, Paul? You guys want to guess who we're talking about?
Can anyone guess who's up next?
Come on, Paul. Lead us into the next guy.
Our next quarterback on the B tier list is Lucky Fingers Massage best customer, and that is Deshaun Watson. So just from a football standpoint, we got a very, very, very small sample size from him last year. He did not play at all in 2021 as he was dealing with the legal issues, and then served his 12-game suspension last year.
Yeah, or 11.
Yeah. With the bye, yeah. So 11, and then they had the bye. So with the few games that we did see from Deshaun, the first 4 that he started back were very, very rough. He did not score more than 17 points in those first 4 weeks, but we did get a little glimmer of hope in those last 2 weeks that Deshaun Watson could return to form. I don't know if they opened the massage parlors up starting at week 17 or what happened, but Deshaun came back and started slinging the rock like he usually does. He finished the year with a 22.8 performance and an 18.6. So we get a whole another year. We get a whole off season. I think that's crucial, is that he gets a true off season with a team. Because correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe he was allowed to participate in team activities during the suspension. So he could only train on his own, correct?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Deshaun Watson's getting some very critical, crucial experience with guys like Amari Cooper, with new receiver Elijah Moore, who I think fits really well in that offense. Nick Chubb is still a beast, so the pressure will be off of Watson. He won't have to do it all like he did in Houston. So I think you're definitely going to see an improvement. And the dude's only 27 years old still. So it's not like he's 30, 31, 32 trying to learn a new offense. He's still a young cat. So I think those 2 weeks at the end of last year are enough for us to see the glimmer of hope that is Deshaun Watson, and that's why we have him in our B tier.
Yeah, I'm pretty much on the same page with you, Paul. I think it would be a massive disservice to Deshaun Watson putting him below the B tier, considering his past performance, and he did show the little glimmers towards the end of last season. I think he's easily on par with these B tier quarterbacks. Are you really going to group him with guys like Kirk Cousins, Daniel Jones, and we'll get into the other guys? But he possesses elite upside. Before his suspension, he was a top 5 quarterback for the past 3 seasons when he played a full season. So that can't be discounted. And he's not old either, like you said. So, I think there's a path for him, maybe not top 5, but I think there's easily a path for him to be top 8.
So we got one more guy left in the B tier, Bob. Your home favorite. Take it away.
Guy? All right. So this is a guy who probably had a career worst year, maybe besides for like his rookie year, which was God knows how long ago that was. That was like 15 years ago or something like that. So Aaron Rodgers has been in the league since 2005, didn't start until 2009. And yeah, aside from a couple years where he got hurt and stuff, that was pretty much one of his worst years, his rookie year. But last year was definitely his worst year. So 26 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, really didn't look like he even really wanted to be there, which is never what you want from a quarterback. But it was clearly time for him to move on, and he moved on to the Jets, who I think have a much better situation on their hands. Definitely have a better wide receiving core. They bring over Allen Lazard. They bring over Randall Cobb. Garrett Wilson is miles better than what they had in Green Bay just on his own. And then you have guys like Breece Hall in the offense. So I think Aaron Rodgers could definitely take a leap and ascend himself back into that elite conversation. Probably doesn't possess the elite upside of some of these other guys because he's older, and I believe the Jets are going to run the ball a lot as well. But I think he'll be extremely efficient and could be a top 10 quarterback pretty easily.
Yeah, totally. He had quite the fall off last year, but like you said, Bob, I think, well, one, he didn't have Devontae Adams, and I think he was just tired of playing in Green Bay. And that, I think having a fresh start can really boost people's productivity. And I think we're going to see that from Aaron Rodgers this year. He's got Garrett Wilson to throw the ball to. He's got Breece Hall to hand it off to. And he's got a very good defense to allow the Jets to have a lead during the game. Now, that may hurt Rodgers' fantasy value. However, I think the fact that he's got Garrett Wilson to throw the ball to is just, we're going to see a lot of touchdowns from Aaron Rodgers again, which is going to be nice. Now, that is a tier break for tier B. So we're going down to tier C now. These are guys that you probably want to let fall to you. You don't necessarily need to grab them at their ADP. You certainly don't want to reach for them. These are guys where if you're planning to be more of a quarterback streaming team, you will be okay with having these guys as your starters. You're going to see a fair amount of 10-point games from these quarterbacks, but you'll get your glimpses of your 20s, possibly even a 30-point game. I think all these quarterbacks have one under their belt at least that we're about to list. So the first one in the C tier is Kirk Cousins. You got something to say, Bob?
Yeah, I was going to just add on, like, I think these guys consistently, maybe not consistently outside of like Geno Smith, who we have here, but these guys over the course of their career have pretty much outperformed their ADP. They just don't possess elite upside. So you could get a lot of deals on these quarterbacks in the C tier.
That's a good point. And Kirk Cousins, perfect example of someone who outperforms their ADP. I mean, he is usually drafted anywhere between like the 8th and probably the 13th round throughout his whole career. And he's had 4 top 10 performances in his career. Last year, he was the QB6, but he was probably like the 12th quarterback taken off the board. And yeah, I mean, he wasn't too good in his beginning years in Washington, but since he's been on Minnesota, he finished as the QB 13, 19, 11, 11, and 6. So he's been a quarterback 1 3 out of 5 years. So we like that out of Kirk Cousins. Now, he does have Justin Jefferson to throw the ball to. So as long as he's on the team, Kirk Cousins is going to have a ton of passing yards. But what he doesn't really possess is any type of rushing upside. He's not really going to be throwing more than 3 touchdowns. He averages about like 2 touchdowns a game. So it's a very average quarterback score, which is a C. C's get degrees in fantasy football too. But like I said in the beginning of introducing this tier, you're going to see a bunch of like 13s, 10s, 15s. You'll very rarely from Kirk Cousins see like a donut game, which is nice. So if you're looking for a quarterback to just get you 10 points and to get you by, and maybe you're going to hope to find that, Justin Fields waiver wire quarterback pickup, then Kirk Cousins is someone that you could snag in like the 10th round this year.
Yeah, and also let's not forget they added Jordan Addison as well. So there's seemingly more weapons for him to work with this season.
And they added T-Hawk too, which is nice.
Full season T-Hawk, yes, that's true.
Yeah, and
it's actually huge.
With Kirk Cousins, I honestly think one of the sneakiest stacks you can make in fantasy football is Justin Jefferson and Kirk Cousins. I mean, I think they're going to rival Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. I think Burrow and Chase are like the only stack I'd take over it.
No, because Diggs and Jefferson are like in a much closer of tiers than Cousins and Allen. I mean, that we're talking a 3-tier difference between quarterbacks. Like you could get 60 points between Allen and Diggs almost every week, but like 60 points for Jetta and Kirk probably comes like twice a year.
Yep, I think it's an underrated stack though, for sure. If that's like a way you like to go in fantasy.
I would just think that like the best stacks are a high upside quarterback and a high upside wide receiver. That's all.
How about we'll call Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson the best value stack.
Sure.
How's that sound?
It's definitely the best value.
If you can go 9 rounds between drafting your wide receiver and the quarterback that throws to him, that's pretty nice.
Yeah. That's very good.
So speaking of stacks,
Ooh,
I actually had this
Stack
quarterback. Yeah, that's actually really good. That should have been my team name. But I had this quarterback stack combo last year, and it was just okay. And that is Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott comes in as our second quarterback on the C tier. And although he did miss a bulk of games last year, he still did okay. He finished with, of course, right when I try to look for it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He had 5 games of the 14 he played where he was a top 10 quarterback. And then the rest were just kind of averaging QB 11 to QB 18. So you weren't getting a lot of special performances out of Dak. He actually had his lone QB1 performance against the Philadelphia Eagles.
That was crazy.
He loves beating the Eagles.
The Christmas game. Yeah, he He either
Cooks
gets
went
butchered
crazy.
by us, or he rocks, or he rocks us.
He Brandon Cooks the Eagles.
Yeah. He went crazy, but with Dak Prescott, he is consistently inconsistent. He pretty much can go like middle tier kind of status. He'll give you a couple pop games like he did against the Eagles, but it is nothing crazy. I think everybody else that we talked about from the B tier upwards has much more upside. Now, the Cowboys did just add Brandon Cooks, so they actually have an established wide receiver 2 for Dak Prescott, but he still finds himself here in the C tier. Very little to no rushing upside. The Cowboys just lost their offensive coordinator, Kellen Mond. Is it Kellen Mond or Kellen Moore?
Kellen Moore.
Kellen Moore. Kellen Moore went and has Justin Herbert. He's the offensive coordinator over in LA with the Chargers. So we'll see how Dak does this year, but he's still, I believe, a QB1. Last year or 2 years ago when he played a full season, he did finish as the QB8. So that potential is certainly there. And CeeDee Lamb is a young breakout star. Brandon Cooks is a true veteran receiver that I think will help Dak Prescott. So he finds himself here in the middle of the C tier.
Yeah, I think another thing that didn't get mentioned was usually Dak was known for not really turning the ball over that much, being a good player that manages the game, does create big splash plays, but also protects the football. He did not do that in his 12 games last year. He had 15 interceptions in 12 games. Not what you want from a quarterback that not only doesn't have elite upside, just doesn't have elite upside and turning the ball over and losing you points in a lot of leagues because you get minus for the interceptions. So just not a good year for Dak Prescott, but I think he's could easily make it into the low end low end quarterback 1 conversation if he plays the full season. But moving on to how I said that a lot of these C-tier quarterbacks tend to outperform their ADP. This guy definitely outperformed his ADP last year, and that's Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones is a sneaky, I'm not going to say high upside, but has more upside than I think a lot of people realize. Finished as a QB9 last year, and he's pretty well known for running also. He had 7 rushing touchdowns last year, and if he could duplicate that again, then there's really no reason to think that he can't be a top 10 quarterback again. There aren't many quarterbacks that possess that kind of rushing upside, and it's very, very sneaky. If he could maybe get into the low 20s of touchdown passes also, then you could be talking about a really, really serious sleeper here in the C tier of Daniel Jones.
Yeah, certainly a risky pick, but again, it's those fantasy managers that make those risks that can really reap the benefits. Daniel Jones is definitely one of those guys. I think rushing ability is the biggest attraction right now for fantasy quarterbacks. So if you find someone like that in those later rounds that can rush the ball for not just yardage but touchdowns too, definitely someone that could help you win a couple weeks. This guy certainly did that too. The next guy in our C tier, that's Tua Tagovailoa. He started off the season last year with a bang. Came out the gates in the second week against the Ravens, throwing 6 touchdowns for 42 points, and then didn't really
at that game.
Yeah, didn't really have a game like that till week 8 again. But the problem with Tua is just it's the health concern. He did only miss 4 games last year. I think
which is crazy.
Yeah, right, exactly. He was certainly rushed back. Everyone's concerned that this guy is not able to play a full season. He pretty much proved that he can, but he's just very fragile, it seems like.
He's the next. I hope I'm wrong, but I think he could be the next Andrew Luck.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to be having
case studies on Tua Tagovailoa.
Andrew Luck had neck and nerve issues, though, right? It wasn't just concussions. Football players deal with concussions.
I don't know the exact injuries off the top of my head with Andrew Luck, but Tua just worries me because he has the history of injuries going back to college as well, with with that serious hip injury, and he's just not a big guy, and he always seems to find a way to just get banged up. There's just some quarterbacks that always just find a way, and Tua just strikes me as that guy. He easily could have been in the B tier, but again, are you really expecting him to play a full season?
Probably not. I would say that like C tier is the spot for Tua as of now. However, just know that if you wait your turn for a quarterback and you grab Tua, you're going to be in for some wild games where he will be responsible for winning you a week. It will happen. However, the second half of the season after the bye week, he just wasn't the same player, scoring 16 points, 18 points, 13, 18, 12. And threw the majority of his interceptions after the bye week too. So concerns for the end of fantasy season, which is arguably the most important part of fantasy season. He was not winning anyone any games in the playoffs. So a little concerning there, but we do think that he belongs in the C tier with these other quarterbacks because you'll get your flashes, but you're also going to get your low end games, and Tua fits right in with that.
Yeah, and my main concern with Tua here is, I mean, it's not unrealistic to say that he's one more concussion from having his career just be over. Like that's, I hate to admit it, and obviously we're not rooting for that to happen, but a lot of his hits last year were scary, and frankly, if I was him, I would not come back to football. But
dude,
regardless,
he's
here. He's a gamer. I do respect him. What'd you say, Bob?
I said he's just a magnet for those kinds of hits. Like, I don't know if it's the way that he I don't know if it's the way he angles his body or whatever, but it just seems like whenever he takes a hit, it's worse than any other quarterback that takes a hit.
Yeah, so, you're always just like, ooh,
yeah. Like, I don't want to laugh. Yeah, I don't want to laugh either, but like, I'm worried that he's going to be like that type of guy that you're always going to wonder, like, what if he played a full season? What if he didn't get hurt all the time? But that's why he's here in the C tier.
So I need some advice from our fans out there. I drafted Tua in the 16th round last year. Is that like is that keeper worthy? Like, do I even think about it, or is it just not? Like, what if I go no quarterback strategy and then I get Tua as my starting quarterback in the 16th round?
I hope you keep him there because
I mean, like, to get a starter in the 16th round is unheard of.
Yeah, but I don't think that like what's his like ADP? Like, I don't think that.
I think it's the 8th round.
Like, I don't think the difference between, although it's big, like obviously in the 8th round you could still get like a solid bench player, a guy that can contribute, but it's not like you're getting, you know, a 3rd or 4th round value like that, where it's like a guy you could seriously rely on all season.
Well, before Paul takes us away and rounds out the C tier, guys, go ahead and comment on our video if you think I should keep Tua in the 16th round for our redraft league next year. I really need the advice because it's either him or Amari Cooper in the 7th, and that's not that appealing.
It's not bad, though.
That's like 3 rounds of value.
It's not sexy, but
Amari Cooper's like a 4th round wide receiver.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead, Paul.
You got a decision on your hands, John, but you got 85 days to think, or not 85, but you got some time to think about it.
Yeah.
But rounding out our C tier is actually a guy that I think could perform better than this. And let's just say, what did he used to say? Like, they wrote back, but I didn't, or I kept the receipts or something. Like,
yeah.
They called, but I didn't write back or something. And this guy is Geno Smith, and he might not be writing back to us for having him this low in the C tier because he did finish as the QB5 last year. So, excuse me, and they only improved the weapons around him. He still has DK Metcalf. He still has Tyler Lockett this year. And they added, arguably, I think unanimously we agree, the most talented receiver in the draft class this year in Jackson Smith-Njigba. And they also used a 2nd round pick to get a running back to also help establish the ground game, which Geno Smith did very, very well in play action passes last year. So Geno Smith is in the C tier just because I think we all expect regression. He was a fantastic Cinderella story last year, on his 4th or 5th team, beating out Drew Lock to be the Seattle Seahawks starting quarterback. And people wrote off the Seahawks, and they played really well last year. They were a playoff football team and they got their butt spanked by the Niners, but that's here nor there. In the playoffs, Geno still made it. So Geno Smith is kind of an underdog here. I would not be shocked if he performs similar to the guys in the B tier, especially with all of those weapons, and if he can find some of that lightning in a bottle he had last year. But realistically speaking, I think this is where he belongs as to date, unless we see some crazy training camp-like videos where he's launching 70-yard nukes to JSN, then maybe we can reconsider. But I feel comfortable with Geno here in the C tier. But I could be wrong. I would not be shocked.
And that is a tier break.
Tier break.
Tier break.
So now we finally get into our D tier, and there's only 3 quarterbacks in our D tier, not a big congested tier, kind of like our B and C tiers are. There's only 3 quarterbacks here, and starting
2 quarterbacks, 1 running back.
Yes, yeah. Got to clarify that. But the first is a true quarterback, and he was a top 10 quarterback last year, and that's Jared Goff. Now, Jared Goff could have some really good games. I see a 34-point game, a 28, 25. He has a bunch of really good games under his belt, but the reason he falls into the D tier is there is hardly any consistency from him. You have multiple single-digit games, and although the Lions got better, that's what you really have to look at is how consistent is this guy going to be? Like, I don't want a 3-point back-to-back single-digit games from my QB1. I don't want, it's just not a guy that you really trust fully. He's more of like a guy you draft as like your QB2, and if your QB1 gets injured, then you feel comfortable replacing your QB1 with him. He's like a filling guy.
Yeah, Jared Goff only twice last year strung together back-to-back games over 20 points. So, like, no consistency, like you said, Bob. In week 13 and 14, he scored 21 and 28 points, respectively. And then in the semifinals and the finals, which is nice, if for some reason you were able to make it that far with Jared Goff as your quarterback, he scored 26 points and then 22 points, respectively. So you definitely want to see more consistency out of your quarterback position, and that's why Jared Goff finds it in the D tier.
Yeah, I would say the thing about Jared Goff is it's not a bad strategy to have Goff and then another quarterback because Goff is matchup king. He performs really well against teams with bad defenses. Washington QB7, Seattle QB1, Jacksonville QB4, Minnesota QB4, Carolina QB2, Chicago QB7. So these are all when his matchups are green, he's finishing as a top 7 quarterback.
Wow.
It's when he plays actual defense is when
I got to grab Jared Goff now late in.
Yeah, I mean, dude, that
New
is
England,
matchup
QB 29, Dallas.
Got to stream him.
Yeah.
Dude, he's the perfect daily fantasy quarterback. Wow.
Yeah, so
dude, whenever his
whenever his matchups are green, he played really, really well. And then if they're orange or red, not chill.
We'll have to throw that up on our TikTok for everyone to save to their favorites, because that stuff will come in handy come mock draft and actual draft season. Let's move on over to someone last year last year everyone was there were probably a handful of people that are reaching on this guy, but at the very least they were drafting him at his ADP, and he did even worse than that, and that's Russell Wilson. So we expect similar production as last year, although I think we are expecting, with the new head coach and just another year on the team, we are expecting somewhat of a bounce back year for Russell Wilson. But I'm not excited to draft Russell Wilson. I probably won't draft Russell Wilson, but I can totally see somewhat of a bounce back season. In fact, he did finish the season pretty well against Kansas City and the Chargers, scoring 24 points. In fact, he ruined Kansas City during the regular season, 27 points and 24 points against Kansas City. But we only saw that one other time in the regular season. He scored 27 points against the Raiders, but against teams that like the Broncos should have won and Russell Wilson should have destroyed, you just were not, you had no idea if you were going to see any type of production out of Russell Wilson. The Colts. I mean, you think that he could blow up the Colts with like the weapons that he has. He scored 10 freaking fantasy points, threw the ball 40 times, and completed 21 passes. Now, is that on the receivers or him? I don't know. I didn't watch the games that much, but like, figure it out, Russell Wilson. You were doing it on the Seahawks when you had a horrible offensive line and you were getting chased for every single play, and you were still making it happen. So Russell Wilson does have the capability to do it. It's just, is he on a team that can allow him to be a top tier fantasy quarterback? The eye test does not think so.
No, I don't think I think the ship has sailed of him being like an elite fantasy quarterback, but I definitely expect him to be better with Sean Payton as his head coach instead of Nathaniel Hackett, who is just clearly wasn't made to be a head coach. He's made to be an offensive coordinator, but I expect Russell Wilson to be a little bit better than I think he could maybe have like a Jared Goff type season this coming year. But again, that's not really saying much.
Right.
Yeah, I think the whole, not to go on a caveat here, but I think the whole thing with Nathaniel Hackett is Denver did that because they thought if they got Hackett, they'd get Rodgers. And then when Aaron Rodgers was like, no, I'm staying in Green Bay, they were like, oh, what do we do now? So then they just went and got Russell Wilson. But yeah, this is the final year for me with Russell Wilson. If he is Dookie, I am never touching him in fantasy ever again. And let's hope that Sean Payton can kind of revitalize Broncos country. Let's ride. But ending our tier list here and finishing out the D tier, yes, is, would you believe it, a rookie? We have, and it's not Bryce Young, it's not CJ Stroud. We got Anthony Richardson here to round out our QB tiers. And guys, I don't know about you, but a lot of this for me is upside, 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 upside.
That's all it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
If I see Jared Goff, Russell Wilson, and Anthony Richardson in this final tier, and I feel like taking a complete dart throw, you got to grab this young kid. He's only played, 13 collegiate games, or started 13 collegiate games in his career. But boy, was he electric with his legs, which can convert into the NFL. But as a passer, I just don't trust this guy. And to be quite frank, anyone not named Michael Pittman, I don't trust on the Colts offense either. Well, besides Jonathan Taylor. But again, this is all upside and this is all ceiling. I mean, this kid's and he's a project for sure. But if he pans out, his athletic skill set and his frame and his build is, I mean, borderline DK Metcalf type freakish hybrid at the quarterback position. So this is strictly, if you want to try and hit a home run, go for him.
Yeah, for sure. I think we're going to see a lot of like designed runs for Anthony Richardson. The Colts are totally going to be like a top rushing team this year because of Jonathan Taylor and Anthony Richardson. I think that if you are a owner of Michael Pittman or whoever else their wide receivers are, I don't think I can name a single other guy on their offense.
Dude, Josh Downs.
Pierce.
Josh Downs.
Come
That's
on.
right. Josh Downs.
Come on.
Not this year, but
maybe not this year.
But yeah, Anthony Richardson, why not? I think that's the perfect way to, that's his perfect tagline. Anthony Richardson, why not? You got nothing to lose if that's like the second quarterback in the second to last round. You've already grabbed your kicker, your defense. You're like, why not get Anthony Richardson?
Yeah. And you don't play fantasy football to finish fifth. You play to win.
I like it, dude. And Russell Wilson will get you that fifth.
Russell Wilson, like, well, I made the playoffs. Yeah, but you got bounced the first week.
Well, guys, thanks for watching. This was our quarterback tiers of the 2023 redraft season. We're getting so close. Go ahead and comment on our video. what quarterbacks do you think we missed? I'll tell you one quarterback that everyone's probably freaking out saying, where is he? Where is he? That's Kyler Murray. Listen, guys, we probably should have said this in the middle of the video, but the reason that Kyler Murray is not in our tier list is because we don't know how many games this guy's going to play. This guy's probably going to be drafted in like the double-digit rounds by someone who just wants him to be a bench stash, but that has been proven not to be the best strategy. You're going to be holding on to a guy that may not play until the 8th or 9th week. I'm not sure. And then on top of that, he comes back after missing all that time and has Hollywood Brown to throw to. I mean, not saying much. So Kyler Murray does not make our list. Other quarterbacks that did not make our list that were considered: Bryce Young, Matt Stafford, Derek Carr, Kenny Pickett. That's pretty much it. Those were pretty much the guys that we were thinking about.
Don't worry, you'll be able to pick them up on the waiver wire in like week 3 or something like that.
Yep.
If you really want them, if they're really doing that well. So
exactly. Well, guys, we appreciate you watching. Go ahead and like this video. Subscribe to our channel. Again, we're trying to get to that 100th subscriber. We appreciate all the support so far. Go ahead and follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. You can follow along to our podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We appreciate it. We'll be back next week. I don't know, guys. Are we due for a mock draft next week? It's been a couple weeks.
We could maybe do a startup mock.
We could do a startup mock. A little dynasty action. That's going to be a long episode.
That's going to be really long.
Maybe we can do a part 1, part 2, something like that.
Well, I think we could do maybe we could do what we did when we just do the auto draft and we just make our own selections instead of picking every single spot.
Let's do
I
that.
like that. I like that a lot.
All right, cool. All right, Startup Dynasty mock draft next week on the eye test. Go ahead, share this with your friends. Say you're not going to want to miss it. These 3 studs are talking football, baby. We'll be back next week. Dynasty Startup mock. Go ahead, like this video. We appreciate all the support. Peace.
Hell, share it with your enemies too.
Oh, yeah.
You don't got to just share with your friends. Share it with people you hate.
Yeah, that
share.
too. Yeah, share it. Bye.
Peace.